The prairie was holding its breath that night. Elias Crowley slept lightly, the way men do when grief has trained them never to rest too deep. The wind slid its fingers along the siding of his ranch house, whispering through the cracks like an old friend who didn't know when to leave. Somewhere beyond the corral, a fence creaked. Somewhere farther still, the land rolled on, dark and endless, carrying the quiet weight of every story it had ever swallowed. Then came the knock, not loud, not demanding, just 3 soft taps, unsure of themselves, as if the night itself had second thoughts. Elias sat up slowly, heart already awake before his body caught on. Knocks after midnight had a way of reopening doors inside a man that he'd nailed shut for good reason. He reached for the lantern beside the bed, but stopped. For a long moment, he just listened. Wind, wood, the low groan of the house settling into itself. The knock came again. When he opened the door, the cold rushed in first. Then the child. She stood barefoot on the porch, toes red from the chill. A thin shawl pulled tight around shoulders too small for the weight she was carrying. Her hair had been braided once neat and careful, but now it had come loose in places, framing a face that was pale but determined. Her eyes were wide not with panic, but with something steadier, braver. "Mister," she said, her voice barely louder than the wind. "Mama needs help." Elias looked down at her, at the dirt on her knees, the way her hands were clenched like she'd been holding herself together one breath at a time. He felt the old ache rise in his chest, the one that came from remembering another night, another door, another moment when help had arrived too late. For a heartbeat, he almost closed the door. Instead, he stepped aside and lifted the lantern. The light spilled out onto the porch, trembling, unsure. Then he reached for another, and another, until the yard glowed soft and golden, like a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Lila," she said. "Mama's name is Mara." He nodded, as if names mattered more than fear, as if saying them out loud anchored them to the world. He pulled on his coat, wrapped a blanket around Lila's shoulders, and together they stepped back into the night. They walked slowly, the lantern swinging between them, casting long shadows that stretched and tangled on the ground. The prairie opened up around them, wide and unforgiving, the kind of place that taught you early how small you were. Lila kept pace beside him, her steps quick but steady. "She won't wake up good," Lila said after a while. "She's been tired for days." Elias didn't ask why. He'd learned that sometimes questions only added weight to already bent shoulders. "She tried to get work," Lila continued, staring ahead. "But folks say widows bring trouble. Mrs. Wickers said so." Elias felt something tighten behind his ribs. He knew Mrs. Belle Wickers. Everyone did. Her kindness lived mostly in her prayers, rarely in her hands. "Papa died last winter," Lila said, as if sharing the weather. "Mama says we'll be all right. She always says that." The shack came into view just before the path dipped low, crouched against the land like it was trying not to be noticed. Inside, the air was cold and thin, carrying the smell of damp wood and boiled roots. Mara Holloway lay on a narrow cot, eyes half open, shame filling the room heavier than the darkness. She tried to sit up when she saw Elias, panic flickering across her face. "I didn't mean Lila shouldn't have." Her voice cracked, and she turned her face away, as if hiding it might undo the moment. Elias set the lantern down and knelt by the fire pit. He didn't rush. He didn't speak. He built the flame carefully, the way a man does when he knows fire can be both comfort and danger. When the room warmed, he poured water, tested it with his hand, and placed the cup beside her. "You don't owe me explanations," he said quietly. Mara looked at him then, really looked. She saw no pity in his eyes, no curiosity sharpened into judgment, just steadiness, respect. Lila crawled onto the cot beside her mother, pressing close. "He lit all the lights," she whispered, like it was a miracle. Morning brought eyes. The light from Elias's ranch had been seen. By noon, whispers followed him like dust. Sheriff Amos Reed lingered longer than usual near the fence. Mrs. Wickers passed with a basket she never offered to share. Mara heard it all through the thin walls. Charity turning into scandal. Kindness mistaken for something dirtier. By afternoon, she had her things packed. "I can't stay," she said, standing in the doorway, pride holding her spine straight even as her hands trembled. "I won't have my daughter grow up thinking she owes the world for surviving." Elias leaned against the post, lantern lit though the sun was still high. "Storm's coming," he said simply. "I've weathered worse," Mara replied. The sky darkened faster than expected. Wind tore across the plains, sharp and sudden. The first drops of rain hit like warnings. Mara stepped out anyway, Lila's hand tight in hers. Then Elias stepped into the storm. The wind pushed at him, rain stinging his face, but he held the lantern high. Its light shook, but it didn't go out. "No one leaves in the dark here," he said, his voice calm, unbreakable. Mara stopped. The storm roared around them, but something inside her finally gave way. Not loudly, not all at once, just enough. She turned back. Days passed, then weeks. No promises were made. None were needed. Elias fixed a loose step. Mara cooked when she was strong enough. Lila laughed again, the sound bright and surprising as birdsong after rain. And years later, when the prairie lights came on at dusk, folks said it was just habit. But Elias knew better. Sometimes, life doesn't ask you to save someone. Sometimes it only asks you to open the door. And if you're listening now, wherever you are, remember this. Light doesn't belong to the worthy. It belongs to the willing. And sometimes, by carrying it for someone else, you finally find your way home.